Noswaith there, good evening everybody, here from North Wales. So, another update video, weekly update. So tonight I'm going to briefly talk about the lighting setup I've got here with the timing schedule. So like the daylight hours, yeah. So how I've reached this information. Then I'm going to look at the differences in temperature from, say, midsummer to end of November now, through my iBbot app. And then we're going to look at the sunset and sunrise times in the village of Nali in Pakistan, which is basically the information from, so the weather data from Nali I've used as a guide to feed into the timings on the technology and the setup. Okay, obviously it's not exact because, you know, if it was to mimic exactly, it would just be very, very complicated and faff. So I've just kind of rounded up the times to kind of like the nearest 15 minutes to make life a bit easier and less sort of OCD. But anyway, so let's, without further ado, so how did I come up with this information? Well, I wrote this down probably, it's gone back a while ago now, hence the roughness on the piece of paper, and I haven't yet typed it up. So I basically got data from this village of Nali, which is in the Punjab province of Pakistan and is close to the Potwar Plateau and Salt Range Hills. And the reason I mentioned Salt Range Hills there is because I sourced that information from a study by Mohammed Sharif Khan on leopard geckos in the wild habitats, yeah, and in there it mentions Salt Range Hills and the Potwar Plateau, so hence me gathering this data. The reason I picked this village was just because it was just close to that sort of area. I mean, there's loads of other towns and villages in that area that could be picked, and obviously each would have their own varying climate. So I'm not saying that this is, you know, the way to do it, but it's just the way that I'm doing it. It works for me, and it kind of fits logically, really. So, okay, so on my laptop, we have weather data for Nali in Pakistan. So we've got sunset times and sunrise times here. So how does that compare to the sunrise and sunset to where I live locally? So I live in lovely sunny Rhyl in Wales, North Wales coast. I'm not from there originally. I'm from Denbigh, which is just 10 miles south. But I live in a village near Rhyl now, so Rhyl is like the closest town. Anyway, they call it sunny Rhyl because it is sunny a lot here, hence why it's such a popular holiday destination, really. Anyway, so distracting now, digressing. So really, we can't really compare the daylight hours in Rhyl to daylight hours in Nali in Pakistan because of their position on planet Earth. Yeah? So they are going to be different because Rhyl is located further north in the northern hemisphere of the world. So it is going to be darker, especially in the winter, than it is in Nali in Pakistan, which is sort of closer to the equator. It's not very close to the equator, but you know, it's further south of the northern hemisphere. So it is, there's going to be sort of it's going to be lighter there during the winter. So I was considering setting my timers to maybe have around 6 or 7 hours of light in the day in December. But I don't think that's necessary now, because when the sun sets here in Wales in the evening, it gets dark at 4 o'clock. And because we have this, which I think is useless, daylight saving thing, it means it gets dark quite earlier. So in terms of the technical devices and the lighting on times and off times, I try and use that to replicate Pakistan times as opposed to UK times. Because if you think about it, leopard geckos in the wild live in Pakistan. They don't live in the UK in the wild. So the climate in Pakistan is going to be a lot different to the climate over here. The hours of daylight in Pakistan is going to be a lot different than over here. So I think we can forget the sunrise and sunset times in real just on that basis. Yeah, that's just my own personal opinion on the thing anyway. So I think if we look at the hours of sunlight in Pakistan in December, here we have 10 hours, and bingo, the lighting setup is set to 10 hours. So that is a replication, basically. Now, obviously, the times, sunrise, sunset, I've just sort of, like I said earlier, rounded them up to the nearest sort of 15 minutes, because when you look at the actual times, it may be 2 minutes past on one day, then 4 minutes past on the next day. So it means you're faffing around with timers on each day, and that would just be too complicated. So I've just rounded it up to the nearest 15 minutes. What I may do this month, as we're in December tomorrow, is maybe change them again middle of December. So as we get closer towards the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, then I may say about the 15th of December, tweak it a little bit by, say, 15 minutes. Nothing too drastic, as too drastic a light change may cause a bit of stress to the gecko. But I doubt Mr. Jinx will get stressed with much change, because he's in semi-brumation now, and I haven't seen him for about a fortnight. So he's in full whack hiding mode, really, unless he does pop out at night time. But yeah, so that's how I explain. That's how I sort of get that information to reflect the lighting. So we have the UVB and Jungle Dawn. The reason I put those together is because they are manufactured through the same brand, so Arcadia, and they connect together to save on plugs and wires. So those two, they come up, excuse me, not long had my tea and it's repeating on me. So they come on at the same time, and they go off at the same time. So I'm kind of like staggered the times to try and recreate sunrise and sunset. Now, this one's pretty cool, the basking light. It's connected to a dimming thermostat. So it dims on and then dims off when it reaches the desired temperature, in accordance with the thermostat setting. So these were the times for November. And then in December, all I'm doing is reducing the time of daylight in the morning by half an hour. So the times in the evening will stay the same, but the morning times it'll just be darker for just half an hour. Okay, so then we're getting 10 hours of sun, which then relates to the 10 hours of daylight of sun in Nali in Pakistan. Okay, So let's look at temperature and humidity differences now. So if I go to my IBBot graph here, so back in early August this year was when I purchased my IBBot air comfort devices, which can sync to an app on my phone and on my desktop, and can tell me the air temperature in the warm side and the warm zone and in the cool zone. Yeah. And you can see by looking at this, so this is the range of temperature, air temperature, from beginning of August up until the end of November. Yeah. And you can see how gradually those temperatures have cooled down, which is basically what the setup is designed to do, yeah, in order to reflect the seasons. Now, the spikes probably explain, humidity. Now, the humidity has sort of been sort of steady-ish. The spikes are probably a good indicator of when I've spray misted the plants. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second because I've kind of changed my method with the spray misting lately. So I'll explain that in a sec when I go into updating the tank. So this sort of gap here may indicate when I changed from a 75 watt bulb, which is being used in spring and summer, to a 50 watt bulb in order to cool down the temperatures for the winter time. Yeah. And since changing those bulbs, the temperatures have cooled down a little. And because it's less wattage on the bulb, it means that it's using the maximum power of the bulb, if that sort of makes sense. Rather than using the 75 watt and just have it set to 20 degrees or so on the thermostat, then it's using less power, I think, if I use a less power wattage bulb, if that does make any sense. I'm not the best with physics, guys, sorry about that, but yeah. But anyway, it's looking kind of good. So we can see from this how the temperatures have gradually decreased. So like in midsummer, we had a high of, let's have a look, 36-ish degrees on the warm side, and on the cool side it was about 24 degrees. So there's still that temperature gradient for the lizard to thermoregulate, and also due to the size of the enclosure and all the plants and rocks and everything that's in there, that probably influences the variations in temperature throughout the terrarium. So that's pretty cool to note. Okay, so onto the tank now. Now, we've got a couple of updates with this. Now, my method with watering now, I'm going through a sort of trying to space out waterings with the plants in order to allow them time to grow. Yeah. And since doing that, they are starting to grow more. Yeah. You can see that wormwood there. It was showing kind of yellowy, browny leaves. That's now being overtaken by more silvery green leaves. So that's a good sign. And there's helianthemum here that seems to be starting to spread more. And I've not watered these at all since planting them in 2 weeks ago. So I'm just letting the soil go through a sort of well, it's like a dry period. They do not. These plants are kind of suited to dry conditions, and because leopard geckos are generally from arid habitats, semi-desert, arid grasslands, rocky sort of terrain, these plants are sort of more suited to that. The only one that is looking a little bit sad is the chamomile. Now, at first, so on last week's update, I was saying how well this chamomile was doing. And then what do I go and do? I give it a little dropsy of water. It could be that, or it could be that maybe the soil there is too dry and it's sort of like shriveled down. I gave it a little bit more water the other day, but now I'm just going to leave it and see what happens. Because sometimes, like I said last week, if you put too much water for certain plants, they will just choke up and die, basically, root rot and whatnot. Yeah, and these succulents can withstand long periods without water, okay? And in order to provide water for the gecko, I can just simply spray mist those plants over at the back there, and then he can just lick the moisture off the leaves and whatnot and the rocks. Okay, so going back to humidity. Now, over the last couple of days, I have inserted, now it's simply just a trial, but I'm trying to lower the humidity in this tank. Because where I live in the UK, our climate is temperate and more humid, obviously, than in Pakistan. And so I've just been trying to lower the humidity, particularly this time of year. It usually is drier, long dry sort of spells over November and December, but cooler temperatures. So I've just, it is basically a trial, but I've put in some air purifier bags here, which soak up some of the air moisture. And this here is a dehumidifier, which I only spent a tenner on. It's nothing major high tech, but I've noticed it has brought down the humidity quite significantly. So it is a little bit of an eyesore, but it's reducing the humidity so that can stay where it is for now. And then obviously over the course of the coming weeks, I'll be able to figure if it is worth keeping or not. Also, I have been able to create a little fake moon. And it's got tin foil there now because I've tried to cover some of it up to kind of make a quarter moon. And then in the middle of December, there'll be a full moon. And then obviously the end of January, the lunar cycle starts again. So if I just turn my light off in the bedroom, we can see how that moon is giving off a very, very dim light. So that's pretty cool. It's like measures less than 1 lux of light. And I've measured that with my illuminance meter. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's basically, in a nutshell, guys, the latest update on Jinxland. So also, look how this asparagus fern, which I trimmed down a couple of weeks ago, there's just shoots just sort of taken off. Yeah. So yeah, that is quite a vigorous growing plant. But yeah, I need the chamomile plant there is sort of figure out and see what happens with that one. I'm not going to do anything to it. I'm just going to see if it will recover. Maybe it just doesn't like terrarium conditions. Maybe it's not the watering, it could be the terrarium conditions. It was coincidence though that when I did add a little sprinkling of water, it just kind of fizzled up. I should have just left it, really. But there we go. Lesson learned. Okay, guys. So there we go. See you again soon.